In this lesson, we'll discuss the concepts of defining orchestration processes. For our learning objectives, after you complete this lesson, you should be able to understand the concept of orchestration, be able to explain what an orchestration process definition is, be able to identify the key components of an orchestration process, including the sequential steps, executable tasks, and task types for organizing, be able to create an orchestration process step, and be able to explain the concept of branching. Let's get started. This slide frames where orchestration fits in the broader order-to-cash cycle. We cover core activities such as order capture, pricing, credit verification, promising, compliance, transportation, shipping, invoicing, and collection. Oracle's order management acts as a connected order hub that supports omni-channel scenarios and integrates with logistics and finance. Keep these touch points in mind. They inform which orchestration steps and integrations you'll need. Our goal is to create a streamlined, compliant, and adaptable fulfillment flow. Continuing with the Fulfillment Orchestration to Invoice OMBP's configuration step, this lesson provides a better insight into the Orchestrate Fulfillment subprocess. Specifically, you will learn key features and related setups for configuring orchestration process definitions, as well as the management of orchestration pause task rules. The outcome of these configurations include optimized business processes, including standardizing and automating fulfillment steps to improve consistency, visibility, and control across order types and channels, reducing errors and manual intervention. Because orchestration processes are configuration-driven, they enable faster, governed process changes and better exception handling, improving agility, compliance, and operational efficiency at scale. Similarly, defining pause task rules in Oracle Order Management Cloud allows you to intentionally stop the fulfillment task when predefined business conditions occur, such as missing data, credit compliance checks, and inventory constraints, preventing downstream errors and reducing costly rework. This improves control, visibility, and exception management, enabling teams to resolve issues earlier, protect customer experience, and maintain compliance while keeping the rest of orchestration predictable. Our first topic will cover the concept of orchestration. Orchestration is the automated sequence of fulfillment steps that process an order after submission or channel transformation. The task clear services call downstream apps such as scheduling, shipping, or billing, and they interpret the responses to update the progress. You can use predefined orchestration processes, or you can define your own to match your business. Orchestration also leverages business rules, pause task, wait steps, and branching to adapt at runtime. Think of the definition as your blueprint, and the runtime instance as its execution on specific lines. Next, we'll discuss task types. Task types group related fulfillment tasks and determine which services you can invoke, such as creating a shipment request or canceling it. Oracle provides a rich set of predefined task types, including schedule, reservation, shipment, invoice, return, pause, and specialized DOO tasks like credit check, trade compliance, transportation planning, procurement, supply, asset management, subscription, and inventory transactions. Here's some examples of predefined task types. You'll note the first one, fulfill order. This represents a set of services that allow communication between Oracle Order Management and your ERP system. In this type of a layer service, you can have multiple fulfillment actions that are executed through a single request, such as a combination of things like shipment and invoicing. Note the example of the second set, invoice. These are sets of services that can communicate with a billing system, such as Oracle Receivables Cloud, so that you can create invoices against an order line. Note the other types of task, pause. These are conditional types of services that you can use to temporarily pause a process so that it waits until a particular date or maybe a particular event happens before it goes to the next step. Note the last example on the slide, which are reservation services. These are type of services that allow the system to reserve items against a fulfillment line. Note the line that says that you can use predefined orchestration processes for a reservation step. However, if you also are going to use Oracle Global Order Promising as part of your implementation, you may want to avoid using this as a reservation step in your process. And that's because it only works against on-hand inventory, whereas if you're using multiple supply sources, such as procurement, manufacturing, etc., then Global Order Promising will base reservations on future supply. This slide is a continuation of the predefined task types, including things such as returns for working with return lines, scheduling tasks that allow you to schedule fulfillment lines, shipment services, which obviously are used for executing shipment activities, and also a general task type of activity. And this includes a catch-all services that communicate things like a human task is required, such as maybe pausing for review or for approval. And for reference, here's a slide that lists more predefined task types. Note that in this lesson, you'll observe a demonstration and you'll also complete an activity for an orchestration process that uses many of these tasks that we've seen. Additional examples of orchestration processes are available as worked examples in the Oracle Fusion Cloud Help application and in the Oracle Order Management Guides. For an example of an orchestration process that includes a pause task, you can refer to the help topic that discusses pause task. You can also optionally create your own task types to meet your specific business needs. This slide gives a high-level explanation of the setup steps. When you do add a task type, Order Management will add some services automatically. The service name will share the name of the new task and will append the task type. You'll create the operation code service, which is the name of the new task type, and it'll also include the inbound operation code service. You can also add services that reference other operation codes, such as things like getting the status or canceling. Note the best practice. To avoid confusion, you'll want to create services that also match the name of your task type to make them clear. And then finally, to finish creating your task, you'll need to assign a status code to that task type, go into your settings to manage the status conditions, and then save your work. We'll talk more about status codes and conditions later on in the course. When you do create your own task type, you'll also need to do the following. You'll need to make sure that you connect the order management application to the fulfillment system that's actually going to perform the tasks and services that you've referenced in the new task. You'll also need to make sure that the new task type you created and referenced will be part of the orchestration process steps that you define. And then finally, you'll also need to use a web service to make sure that you can send the response to the fulfillment system. Next, we'll talk about creating and managing an orchestration process definition. The predefined orchestration process may suit your business needs right out of the box, or they might require some modification. Distributed order orchestration does deliver the following processes. Order fulfillment generic process, which entirely covers the complete gamut of ordering. That includes creating the order, scheduling, reserving, shipping, and invoicing lines. There's also a bill-only generic process when you only need to generate a bill but not ship a product, or return order process, obviously for creating returns and credits within the system, or an inventory transaction process where you simply need to transact inventory. This screenshot shows a detailed section of an orchestration process definition. Under the process details, note the two tabs for step definition and status conditions. Basically, this contains a variety of information such as dependencies, planning, change management, all that are listed as steps within the business process. The step sequence will tell the system in which order to execute the steps. The step name is a user-defined descriptive name explaining what that step does within the orchestration process. And then the step type will further determine what type of a step is this. Is it a service? Is it a pause, a wait task? What is the step actually doing? And then there's several other steps that we'll talk about as part of the process. Before you start creating any steps on the process, you'll need to define the header information. This will include such fields as the process name, also a user-friendly process display name, a process class, which is a way of listing a predefined list of classes and statuses that can be used against this orchestration process. And then notice the other fields. Obviously, you have description fields, you have your date fields for controlling, and other fields that we'll talk about as we go through the definition of our orchestration process. The bottom part of the screen shows the process details, which we covered in the last slide. Again, you'll use the icon to add your sequential steps. You'll begin by naming the step, determining what the step type is, again, whether it's a standard service step performing an action, or if it's a sub-process, a conditional, merging. Again, all of these things will be discussed in further lessons. And then note that also you can scroll for additional step attributes, as there are many attributes and options that can be set up for each layer or task within an orchestration process. Next, we'll talk about dependencies between steps within a process. Within a process, you can use the dependencies options to set up branching. Let's talk a little bit about what that means. As you create your lines within the orchestration process, you can determine if this line is going to have dependencies or conditional branching. You would set up the following. The step still has a sequence and a step name. For a dependent line, you would determine what is the previous step before this conditional step, what would be the next step after this step, and then also you can determine what the branching conditions are. So for example, will this branching condition mean that you have conditional branching where perhaps there are multiple sequences that must happen in parallel, or will it be maybe a selection of sequences depending on other conditions? Then the evaluation sequence field allows you to determine where the step would be evaluated in what particular order. So in other words, if you have a branching condition that says the step that's performed will depend on condition X, Y, or Z, then the evaluation sequence would say, consider this particular option first, then the next one second, the next one third, and so on. The otherwise branch would be used as a default. So if all the other conditions are not evaluated or executed, then you can determine what the default or basic option would be by specifying the otherwise branch. Included in this lesson, you'll see an example demonstration of an orchestration process definition that has a branching condition. Next, let's talk about using Oracle Business Rules within an orchestration process definition. Oracle Business Rules, or OBR, is an Oracle middleware tool that integrates to Order Management Cloud. It's used when you need to make runtime decisions or conditional decisions for process behavior. The slide contains bullets of some of the common components that are part of OBR. We'll talk about these in further topics, but for example, cost of change basically is used for ranking what is the difficulty or cost involved for making a change to an order. Note that cost here does not mean a monetary cost, it means what is the difficulty or risk involved against the duration or fulfillment of the line. There's a compensation pattern. This is used to override the default or normal processing step during what's called change management. There's definitions of lead time expressions, which allows you to set what is the expected duration time of a particular process step for process planning calculations. So again, this is not lead time like we would think of when we're thinking about planning. Instead, the lead time expression here does a default calculation to determine in a perfect world, if all these tasks are executed in an orchestration process definition, how long do we expect for the system to actually execute that step? Then you have other factors such as line selection criteria. This allows you to set up filters that will determine are there particular fulfillment lines that are not needed to call a particular task service specified for a step. Also, as described in the previous slides, you have branching conditions. These are criteria that you can set that'll say you need to meet these before executing the next steps in a branch. And then a pause rule. You can use this to set criteria that needs to be met before we would pause a particular step in the process and also before you would release the task to let it resume. This lesson also includes a demonstration for the creation of a pause task rule. The next topic discusses validating a newly created or a modified orchestration process definition. You can validate orchestration process definitions manually and also at any time by using the validation action step. Also, the validation process will always occur anytime you release a new orchestration process definition. There are certain things that will of course have to be validated as part of a successful release. Note that the system will raise errors and flag those. The system will also display a little error icon next to the orchestration process name, letting you know that it failed validation. It'll also create a list of errors that will be retained until you resolve those in the next batch validation run successfully. Also note, the system will safeguard you by not allowing you to release a process definition if it contains any errors. Next, we'll talk about setting up an orchestration process definition for orders that contain specifically coverage items. If you decide to set up orchestration processes that will execute covered items or covered item services, then you can use that same orchestration process instance for both the covered item and the coverage item, depending on your business needs. Note though, if you use different instances for both, where you have one for a coverage item and then one for a covered item, then you can coordinate those instances through rules. By using the same orchestration process instance, you'll ensure that the orchestration process uses the same steps in the same sequence and also at the same time for both the covered item and for the coverage items. So in essence, if you define a process assignment rule that assigns the same orchestration process to both the covered item and the coverage item, then a single orchestration process instance will process the fulfillment lines. By defining rules, you could use filters to determine which particular steps are executed within the flow. Note the example here is for a laptop and also for a coverage item which is covering the laptop. The top part of the line shows the steps that would be executed for the actual laptop itself, including scheduling, reserving, shipping, recording that laptop in your install base, and then invoicing. Notice that the contract step here would be filtered out based off of the type of item. Then note below that the same steps could be used with filters to also process the coverage item, which would represent the warranty for the same laptop on the order. With those rules, the filter would say we don't need to execute the scheduling, reserving, shipping, or install base step because it's a warranty item. Instead, it'll integrate with contracts and create an invoice charge for the warranty. This slide shows how you can use a pause task to coordinate different orchestration process instances. The orchestration process steps for the covered line, which is the laptop computer, are schedule, reserve, ship, install base, and then invoice. Whereas the orchestration process steps for the coverage line, which is the warranty for the laptop computer, include pause, contracts, and invoice. With this approach, you have to coordinate the two processes so that the coverage line doesn't go all the way through the contract step before the covered line is actually shipped. You want the contract to be created only if the shipment part is successful. You can set the pause exit criteria as a condition, such as shipped quantity is greater than 0. Then when you add a coverage line to the existing order, something similar happens. A different orchestration process instance is assigned to the change order. The pause task conditions and coordinates these two processes. Our last topic for the lesson is setting up an orchestration process to reduce inventory. When you automatically execute the fulfillment of orders within Oracle Order Management Cloud, your company's inventory gets automatically reduced when the item has been picked and then shipped. But what happens if you also sell items over the counter, such as a will call pickup? You can set up the order management application to handle these types of transactions. For information on how to do that, see the Order Management Readiness training, which is available on the Order Management Readiness page. For convenience, the link has been provided in your student guide. The lesson includes a demonstration for setting up an orchestration process which reduces inventory when the sales order isn't picked or shipped, such as the previous slide depicted. This lesson includes 3 student practices for you to reinforce what you've learned. They include examining an orchestration process definition, modifying an orchestration process definition, and creating pause task rules. To recap our lesson, you've learned the following within this topic: understanding the concepts of orchestration, understanding what an orchestration process definition is, and understanding the different components that make up the process, including step definitions, task selection,